Now streaming live, it says. Good evening, everyone, and welcome, friends, to this launch of the Garlic Press book, Green Burial by Martin Hayden. It's very wonderful that we can communicate with you all over the world at this moment. There's extreme fog here in Leiston, in Suffolk, and I don't know if there's also fog inland where Martin is. I'd like to explain the structure of the evening. I'm Michael Laskey, as you can probably see from my name on my the bottom of the screen. And I'm the publisher of this excellent book. This is the first book I've ever published. I've published a lot of pamphlets, but never a book before. And I was thinking that it's Martin's first collection, first full collection, and I was thinking that it would be a simple, slim volume. In fact, I was thinking it would be, say, 64 pages, but when we came to look at it, when we came to look at the poems together, it was obvious that we'd be absolutely unable to do justice to Martin's work in 64 pages. So what we have is a book that's 100 pages long. Martin is mature, I'd say. He's not a young man starting out on his poetry career. He's a couple of years younger than me. And so in a way, this is a selected poems, because we turned down a lot of poems between us that we thought wouldn't fit in the book. And this is a best of Martin Hayden. And the structure of the evening's event is quite simple, but we'll be bobbing about a bit. Martin's going to read poems, and three other friends, poet friends, all from the same poetry workshop group, on Martin's invitation, each of us going to read one poem that we've chosen. Martin gave us first choice of which poems to read. So we're going to alternate Martin's reading. He's going to read a couple of poems, then Rob Locke is going to read a poem, then Martin's going to read a couple of more poems, and Elizabeth Cook is going to read a poem, and then Martin will read a couple more, I'll read a poem, and Martin will bring us to the close with a couple of poems. So perhaps now's the time that we welcome Martin Hayden. I'm hoping that Martin is going to click in. Here he comes.
Here I am, yes.
That's lovely.
Nice,
right, Martin.
Good evening. Yes, I'm going to start with a poem called Dangerous Quaker Poem, which is the first poem in the book. And it's not an accident, because I am a Quaker. It's dangerous because the poem is set on the edge of the sands in Morecambe Bay, where we were camping once, some years ago, three of us, and on a whim we decided to cross the sands, which is the most unwise thing to do unless you have a guide. But it was the traditional way to cross to Ulverston and Swarthmore Hall, which was the home of Quakerism, really. Margaret Fell, the mother of Quakerism, lived there. And there's an anecdote, which is also referred to in the poem, that Judge Fell, a very powerful figure, her husband, who could really have probably damaged the development of Quakerism in the area, but he didn't. He supported it. He never became a Quaker, but it's said that when Margaret held meetings in his house, he left his study door open. So here we are, a Dangerous Quaker poem, and it's subtitled, A Guided People. Make for that marker with its twig of leaves, a tiny vertical in this stretch of tidal flats. Where there was no channel yesterday, your shins drag through water, the probing stick, a half-formed thought, going down so far you're thrown forward. Your foot smacks on mud, wobbling like thickened jelly. Keep moving, for God's sake. Why cross? Maddened by motorbikes on the sands. And anyway, we're after Quaker credentials, like this poem, with its air of an improvised journey, not forgetting its broad brim hat or the door, left ajar in Swarthmore Hall, so Judge Fell could hear 30 people fall into silence. And the second poem I'm going to read at this stage is called The British Army Effects a Rapprochement. It's going back to a time when I'd been to a wedding in Borth, Nigel's wedding. Nigel might be out there somewhere. And I decided, and we were students, I decided I was going to walk up to Barmouth, up the coast, the Welsh coast to Barmouth. It would take a couple of days. And this is something that happened on the second morning after I'd left the B&B and was walking up the road. Yeah, that's it really. On the coast road, a mile from Towyn, a man stops his car, kills the engine. Are you walking for your health? Almost smiling. Or would you like a lift? A blue morning in April. Snowdon white in the north. 3 brass pips, badge on cap. I'm addressing all of you, voice. Whose moustache lurches when the walker, giving peace a chance, adventuring to Barmouth on his own 2 feet, replies, I'm walking for my health. A military silence. The captain and his car bristle off. Sometime later, on this otherwise empty road, a second car pulls up. A seen-it-all dog sitting on the back seat. The pleasant-voiced driver bespectacled in civvies. On impulse, he gets in. Over a couple of miles, they set the world to rights. A man for all seasons, of course preferable to the sound of music, until mid-sentence, saluted by a stiff-backed soldier, they're driving through the gates of Tonfanno Army Camp. The driver, a fraction more briskly, asking, now, are you going to the guardroom? He makes a sheepish exit with an almost regretful glance back at the guardroom.
So here I am coming back, and I hope Rob is going to come now as well. Here's Rob. Hello, Rob. Can you unmute yourself, old chap?
Is that better?
Lovely. That's brilliant. So, Rob, you're going to read a poem now that you've chosen, a poem titled, nicely metaphorically, I feel, Balance.
Yes, indeed.
Perhaps you'd just like to explain to us before you read it why you particularly chose that one, and I'll vanish again.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to read Balance, which was written in memory of Mike Johnson. And I chose this one because I also knew Mike, and I was glad to be reminded of him in such a truthful, tender, skillful poem. Mike's quiet, inescapable logic is mentioned, and there's a similar logic at work in the poem itself, guiding the choice of breaks between lines and stanzas as it works its way towards the self-deprecating, good-humoured, I think, final line. Balance. I'd forgotten you. It took me time to find the name even, once I'd remembered the stick that you varnished a stewed tea brown, one end an easily gripped crook I could push off into a steady stride, the heft just right to flick bramble or nettle. I'd bought one from a batch you gave for a sale. Each summer I'd glance at where I'd left it, in the stack of them by the front door of the croft, until, suddenly unsteady, only one ear working, it kept me company everywhere, helped me ride the rocks across the arete on Ben Nevis a year on from your loss. Kind of memorial. It brought with it your quiet, inescapable logic, time to give up further treatment, as it lodged here and there and held firm. Then one year, facing a wire bridge, just a strand for feet and one for hands, no way of clasping a stick as well, I dropped it on the bank to retrieve later. But later, it had gone, joined no doubt someone else's walk. I'd lost the means of almost holding on to you.
Thank you, Rob. That was lovely. He's obviously, he was a brave man too, wasn't he? That stopping the need for further treatment. That's a very nice touch, I think. So now Martin is going to come back to us and he's going to read. Martin, hello.
Hello.
So you're going to read
20th century.
20th century first, and then a couple of the short poems for Ben, which is the heart of the book, really.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Yes. Well, this is called 20th Century, and it was written before any pandemic. In fact, it was written in the middle of what you might call the Trump Brexit phenomenon. And it takes a sort of longing look back at the 20th century. Well, almost longingly, but because some of the horrors of the 20th century are not glossed over in it. But it developed unexpectedly, I think, it surprised me, into a love poem, I think. And it helps if you know the film of Romeo and Juliet made by Zeffirelli, which came out, well, in the 20th century. And has a marvelous cinematic moment between the ball and the balcony scene, where Romeo's friends are calling out, "Romeo, Romeo," and the sleepy nurse is calling out, "Juliet," and you hear the two names like that. So this is my poem called 20th Century. My home. I no longer feel at ease in this new one. I came to in the green gatefold of the Close to the Edge LP. My mother's milk soothed the sores of the bomb sites. My father's motorbike missed the tree trunk by a fraction. He would not be got out of bed by Hitler's planes, though he sat up in hospital after the bleed and died. And I shrank to the bottom of the class for 7 years, until divinity, music, and Shakespeare, Richard III, surprised me. I found out about the tone in which to read Lady Chatterley in the corner at lunchtime. I'd seen the photographs of the pit, not Quaker Mass, far too neatly filled with bodies. Eric Clapton's scream was electronic, but even a guitar can weep. Years before Dowland's Lute and Lady. Dooms of love were deeper than any sea dingle. I could not speak, looking into the heart of foolishness, until I clasped your hand, and we ran down the hill to an Antipodean tryst, and in the star-rich dark heard distant calls. Romeo. They'd lost him. And even more sleepily, Juliet, the nurse. And how do you finish a poem about the 20th century, you ask? And I say, undress completely and get into bed together for the first time. Well, a bit of a transition now. In 2018, my youngest son took his own life a few months before his 33rd birthday. So I decided to write, on that birthday, I made the decision to write 33 short poems for Ben as a kind of birthday present, really. And it makes one work, really. I think it's a cycle of poems that needs to be read together. But there are two longer poems, still short, and I'd like to read two of those now. All through the sequence, there are references to the night sky and the stars and the planets, which I'd managed to interest Ben in, and he kept that interest. This poem reflects that, the first one I'm going to read. Number 19. I think of Gunn's Camp, the Hollyford Valley, New Zealand, where in '74 I woke in the middle of the night, giddy with the overhead brilliance. In the Kalahari, they claim to hear the stars, amazed these white men, deaf to the starlight's musical shh, shh, don't know them as great hunters. And the mother lifts her baby to one particular star, asks, as stars have heart in plenty, take his little heart and give back the heart of a star, of a hunter. I'd shown you Vega, Deneb, Altair, the summer triangle, appropriate for one so quick to calculate an angle, so adept at numbers. Now I'll give you to our favorite constellation, Orion. You'd always let me know if it was clear. Number 24, set in Scotland. Ben and I had been around Ben Allegan. A tough day out, the traverse at Ben Allegan a few times. And the trickiest part of it, they're not the highest, are the rocky ridges called the Horns of Allegan. But you didn't have to go over them. There was a narrow path round. And we'd done that a couple of times and been delighted to find a splashing spring of cold, fresh water over 2,000 feet up to fill our bottles with. And this poem is about me going back there the summer after he died. It's number 24. Something in life will never be right if I don't do it now for both of us. Gather water from that spring below the Horns. You know it well. We've twice filled our bottles there. A goat path, as the Scotswoman dismissed it, a tiny track perched on a ledge round the steep side, not quite sheer, and small buttresses with mossy drips, but none with that steadily running tap, I remembered. I hold my bottle below a drip, only for a drop to fall just to the left, readjust only for one to bulge and vanish from a third spot. But round a few tricky bends, there it is, not dried up after all, a jet from straggly lips, a corner cool with nightstone. Black, dark green and pale green moss and tiny flowers, starry saxifrage, meadow rue, mountain everlasting.
Lovely, Martin. Thank you very much. So we're now going to have Elizabeth Cook. Here she is. Elizabeth, hello.
Hello, hello. Nice to be here.
You're going to read a poem called Upper Loch Torridon.
I am, yes.
Which is kind of characteristic in a way of the book, isn't it? Because it's full of the vitality of natural life.
Yes.
So lovely. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Well, I thank you. And I love this book altogether. And there's a quality of great freshness and being present in the whole collection, and particularly marked in this poem, which takes the reader in a process of discovery as we make out what is there. The language in this poem is unostentatious, but absolutely spot on. The verbs are quite marvelous. And there's a phrase at one point, "we take in," which is so brilliantly used because there's no taking involved in this. There's a self-subduing witnessing. So, Upper Loch Torridon. A cloudy Scottish mid-morning, drizzle showers hiding the hills, keeping us off them. We walk on a little road above the shore. Some dark, wet driftwood, jostled by waves, juts up oddly at one end. Driftwood or seal? As if pouring itself down into the water, the creature lifts and dives, a thick, tapering tail going last. An otter. Expectant, we scan the grey, empty surface. There. He holds his dog head up out of the water as he grips on a fish to chew and swallow. Then, instant lithe swimmer, tips himself to dive deep. 3 times we watch, desperate to spot him first, exclamations chiming as he resurfaces, busy, catching the pieces in the side of his jaw. Where now? He swims shorewards and we lose him behind a large boulder. Is that it? No. He's there on the shore edge in front of us, whiskery snout lifted, sniffing at the air, squinting. Has he seen or smelt us? Expecting him to dart away, we take in his paws, sleeked fur, body tail. But he rolls in the seaweed like a puppy in heather, scratches his back on the stones, considers. We know the world for a moment just as it is, as he walks easily into the water and swims out.
Lovely, Elizabeth. Beautifully read. Thank you very much. So now we'll go back to Martin, who's going to read some poems from one of the sections. There are 5 sections in the book, and one of the sections are poems about New Zealand. And you're going to read some New Zealand poems now, I think, Martin. Is that right? Oh, you're going to read one about your mother first.
First stuff about my mother, yes. Yeah. Okay. So I've made several attempts to write a poem about my mother, and I wasn't really happy with any of them until eventually I did a writing exercise at the Hospice Writing Group in Bury, and this came out of it. It's called Her Hands. My mother was a nurse, by the way. Her hands. In one, this knife, baker-light handle, well baked, into part melted brown ridges. In the other, this cylindrical sharpener. She whisks them together in rasping abrasions, slurp, slap, until the worked edge silvers. A bad-tempered struggle to balance the books at the end of each month, the pen striving to move columns of figures as if they're boulders. I'm sent through the park, past the fountain's small pond with its local celebrities, 2 ducks, to cross the A35, trafficless in the evening, where the tobacconist, a smiling man, reaches for the packet of Craven A, as soon as I walk in. The yellowed fingers and nail, the hardened skin. I open the hand, study it. Friendly rough, not tough rough. It scrubbed and rubbed clothes in suds, soaped backs and bottoms, held fingers, arms and legs steady for repair, worked round a wound with iodine. Precise layerings of dressings, the round and up and over, the under and in and out of bandage. A hand alive with stored knowledge. What feels right or wrong on skin, in the heat of a brow, in the workings of joint or muscle. This is a hand to hold on to. That characteristic deep intake and long breathe out of thoughtful resignation was how you ended. The nurse I summoned held your wrist, found no pulse, and saying the name for my ears rather than for what was you, "I'll just place your hands here, Dorothy," took the one I'd just been holding and laid it with the other across your chest. Yes, there is a whole section of poems about New Zealand, important place for us. My wife and I met there. We lived there for 4 years, slightly over 4 years. And when we were first a family with a baby and a dog, we used to go to Kartiki Beach in Otago, a marvelous long beach with nobody there. And we'd walk up and down, enjoy the sand and the openness and everything there. Even though just behind the dunes was the main arterial South Island Road, there's nothing around really. When we left to come back to England, I took a stone from Kartiki Beach with me. More of that later. So these two fantasias on Kartiki Beach, I wrote after we went back to New Zealand and revisited Kartiki Beach. And the first one is called Two Shoes. A fantasia, of course, in music is a piece that can shoot off in any direction, and where it you give it its head, really. I leave my shoes by the side of the river mouth we waded, the graininess of sweet water carving its shallow channels through the sand. Point back at them, tiny there among the gulls. When you miss them from my hands, you tense slightly. Might the gulls tug at the laces? Are they far enough from the water? Is the tide coming in? Could they be stolen? I do feel proprietary nostalgia, not just for two boots waiting on their own in a sandy haze, but for all my lost, left behind shoes, as if they were all there, a line down the long beach, going back and back to the crack of my father's and grandfather's, tough ankle leather, well worked, my ancestor in Champagne, his Huguenot feet clad in all the nearly worn out, the cobbled together, the clack of clogs perhaps, the feet bound with hessian, and how far back to shoelessness, to dusty thickened skin, as tough as old, to hairy feet, a curious flash of white at ball and heel. But who is curious? And who is this, with steps so uncertain, each a lunge, a potential tumble? Well, the second fantasia is called A Stone. It's about that stone I mentioned earlier that I took back with me. And when we were back in England, eventually I decided we were never going to get back to New Zealand. But surprisingly, we did manage it more than once. And so this is A Stone. And I was going to say it reveals where that stone I've mentioned. It reveals where that stone is. Now, Rain from nowhere, from a Tarkovsky movie, spatters pleasantly, moistens the sand in little licks. We assess the smidgen cloud overhead. Why it has chosen us? Most likely, nothing has chosen us. We may not even have chosen ourselves. Unlike the small stone in the sea nearby, which I chose carefully, put in my coat pocket and carried to my desk drawer in the Northern Hemisphere, where it spent most of those 40, though I would pick it up and think of Kartiki. You with a baby strapped to your front, a black and white spaniel scampering, having given up on the chances of ever coming back. Until we did, 2 years ago, and I brought it here, spun it low, 2 skips and a splash, and lost forever. Though it's only just over there, somewhere, and doesn't know how well travelled it is. Back with the others, shifting in the rhythm of the tides. There was always so much sea and space and nothingness out there. To each other now, we're both new and well known. The fragments and filaments of the self just hold, and even my proximate knowledge of the whereabouts of a stone allows a kinship that issues in a simple line of song. We were here, we were far away, we came back again.
Lovely, Martin. Thank you very much. So now it's my turn to read a poem, and I've chosen a poem called Long Distance, which is a celebration of long distance walking, which this poem particularly is dedicated to two of his sons. Underneath the title Long Distance, it has for Ben and Will 20 minutes ahead, as young people usually are. And he has an epigraph as well, which is from Chaucer, and we been pilgrims passing to and fro. And that sense of a pilgrimage is in this poem, that sense of the awareness of God. And also it's a kind of celebration of the actual act of walking and of the people and the things that he observes, the natural things that he observes along the way. It's in 4 short sections. They're different, so I'll try to do a decent pause between each one, but they make the whole thing. I should have stopped at St. Fillan's Priory, not for the weathered jagged bits of wall or the green tumble of the Celtic mound, or even the shade of the tall tree cluster, but for the whatever it was made me slow and surprise myself with the silent prayer. But I felt the pull of my 2 sons in front, who, when invited, surged away, the eldest with the odd glance back, and didn't want to lose the beat of the heart and the tread on the track, the rhythm of daily walking. I walk all morning against the river's flow, but with the dippers, as he splashes head first under twice between a stone and a boulder. The bluebells, just beginning to straighten, become, in the season's northward fade, violets and primroses by my feet. Below the wood warbler, spotted by the Glaswegian, dinking through leaves, getting his trill going. When we stop to look up, we realize how imperceptibly what was ahead has turned up again as what's back there. We chat once more with Oxford and Reading, bent under packs bigger than their torsos, whose stop, go, boom and bust makes for all these crisscross encounters, but their eventual breakup. Oxford released speeds off out of sight. Reading is glimpsed on the A82, fitting his pack into the cab of a truck. Each morning we pass the young couple's camp on Lockshore or Riverside below the path. This time he's lifting hot water from the fire. My jovial request for a coffee rebuffed. It's for the rest of the washing, knickers and pants already draped from a rowan. Later, hunched under enormous burdens, they still overtake us. Last seen on Rannoch, beside the old stone of Bar Bridge, on the only grassy bank within 10 miles, by a small fire of rubbish. They're brushing their teeth in tandem, one hand free for a wave. I think that's just a lovely ending, that wave to us while they're cleaning their teeth. So thank you very much. So now I'm going to call back Martin, who's going to read the final poems for us, including the title poem. Martin, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, another poem from New Zealand. This one's called Near Glenorchy. Glenorchy, a favourite spot of ours in New Zealand. I went there first on a residential school trip. We went there as a family with a baby, and we went when we returned. It's a wild place. We went there 25 years before Peter Jackson and a crew went and used some of the dramatic scenery there for the Lord of the Rings trilogy of films. So we were there first, but and the baby, he's been back quite a few times more recently as well. Anyway, this is about an ancient forest, which is near Glenorchy. Once in the forest, a high canopy keeps us cool in muted light. As when the body shuts down in sleep, we trust the drift of the path, senses submerged, lungs buoyed by each good breath. We round a giant fallen tree, a beached vessel by a bank, look through the exposed, weather-cleansed tangle of roots. Saplings lodge anywhere, 3 ballerinas on a prone trunk, their sketchy twirls tremulous, diaphanous. Death is abundant here. A deep-rooted, huge stump has shreds pointing up like a shattered pinnacle. Some saplings curl, some high trees list, some bark is flaking. Some aging trees have strips of bark like planks nailed on. There's rotting wood, red, rich to touch and smell. These are New Zealand beech. Their trunks birch grey when young, several wrapped in straggly moss like seaweed. You assess the height of sturdy trees, too tall even for masts, linger by massive boles, in whose company your life is simplified and less momentary. If there is such a thing as an absolute, these trees achieve it, like tall, gentle Bill, calming us with his eyes, though he was felled overnight. The leaves are tiny, mostly high up, fluttering down one at a time, the last of some confetti, or the first. What is the point of a forest is answered just by being here. Well, the last poem is called Green Burial Site. We'd been to this green burial site in winter, where it was a very bleak and bare and slightly desolate looking place, really. But then one sunny summer's day in July, we went back. I think there were 3 of us, perhaps 4. Us went back there, and that's what this poem is about. And it's one of those poems where the title is the beginning of the poem. Green burial site it is at last. Thick grass at ankle, tall fronds at waist, a July profusion alive and dying. The flower petals dropping away from compacts of seeds, a patch of almost shrubs gone dry and frizzled, a collapsed teasel arching spiky hairbrushes over tufts, a larger than life head-high spire with all but the lowest tier of its leaves stripped away, and still clinging here on the pitted mound, a survivor from the wooden enemy we planted. The neat wooden board with name and dates looks dusty, cobwebbed even, but a closer look shows 2 crickets riding its top and a grasshopper attached downwards like a safety pin. A small skipper scooters around the base as we nod our heads forwards and sideways at the tortoiseshells in direction. Not to mention, how many rings has a ringlet? It could have been. Now a green catapult fires itself and floats into the cushion of the grass.
Martin, that was lovely. I love that safety pin hanging down. And I love that confetti in the end of the forest poem, the first of the confetti or the last of the confetti. It's great. Lovely. Well, thank you all very much for coming. It's been a lovely reading. We've had a lovely time, and these are great poems. And if you want to buy them, if you want to buy the book with the beautiful John Crome picture of the pouring land oak on the front, you can get it from my website. That's www.michaellaskey.co.uk, and it's there under publications. Well, it's on the home page. You're on the home page, Martin, of course, as it's a new publication, and I hope some of you will. Now, naturally, I'll send it to you. I'll be delighted to do that. And I'm sure it's a book that's going to do very well and sell out because of its quality, because of all its life, all the autobiographical facts, the kind of the gentle thoughtfulness of it. So thank you very much indeed for coming. It's been lovely.